Welcome to Guns, Guns, Gear, and Guns with Gary Gunderson. I am Gary Gunderson. As you are probably aware by now, H.R. 1808, the latest so-called assault weapons ban, passed the House and is likely going to a well-deserved death in the Senate. But much like the previous hearing about the bill in the Judiciary Committee, in the debate in front of the Rules Committee and on the floor of the House, these politicians exposed their shallow talking points, their ignorance, and shed light on their own belief you have no real right to bear arms, while saying that they are not undermining the Second Amendment.
67% of Americans support an assault weapon ban.
This 67% number has been thrown around a lot in recent debates on the issue, but I have a few problems with this Politico poll. One, it was taken just after the Uvalde shooting, when emotions are running high and people are not likely to give it proper consideration. Two, there were less than 2,000 respondents. Now, I know you don't need like 10% of the population to get a good sample size for statistical analysis, but this still feels a little small to me and like something that could go completely the other direction if done again. And thirdly, I don't care if it's 99% supporting a ban. It does not make it constitutional.
Well, I have to say that I am aware of studies that show that during the assault weapons ban, mass shooting fatalities were 70% less likely to occur.
Experts revealed that the casualties of mass shootings would have dropped by 70% if the last assault weapons ban had stayed in place.
The 70% of mass shootings stat, that they both went down and that 70% of lives in other shootings would have been saved, is from one source, which even admits in the conclusion that this analysis is not definitive, that there are many additional factors to consider. And where this information was sourced also indicates that mass public shootings are a fraction of total gun violence, that family murder suicides are twice as common, and that if not for an outlier in the year 2012, mass shootings from 2009 to 2013 would have actually gone down compared to the period of 2004 to 2008.
They've talked about hands being dangerous and knives being dangerous, but hands and knives and other weapons that they discussed don't kill people in volume and number like AR-15s do.
The Second Amendment gives citizens the right to own a firearm. Absolutely, it does. But it does not specify the type of weapon that could be allowed. That was left open purposely to give legislators an opportunity to make life-saving common sense accommodations.
Fact, the Constitution and the Second Amendment does not prohibit the ban on assault weapons.
Well, when the Founding Fathers wrote the Second Amendment, these kind of weapons didn't even exist. They had muskets and flintlock pistols that could fire 3 or 4 shots in a minute in a good day, and they weren't very accurate at all. Founding Fathers did not know or anticipate these weapons of mass destruction.
I'm sure the founders, as they were discussing the Second Amendment, debated whether we ought to have mass rapid-fire weapons covered by the Second Amendment. They had no idea such weapons certainly didn't exist.
Then Justice Scalia, in the District of Columbia versus Heller case, adopted that language. And Scalia, of course, is the great originalist of all time. So, of course, you would go back to the writing of the Second Amendment in 1791, and he said that he incorporated that vision of defending guns that were in common use at the time, which means muskets, not semi-automatic assault weapons.
As said in my last video and in my video where Joe Biden incorrectly asserts that you could not own a cannon when the Second Amendment was written, there were several rapid-fire firearms of the day, and the Founding Fathers were aware of them. And you could even own a cannon, which has as large a destructive capability as, yes, a weapon of war. And you see they bring up Scalia here, and this is an odd tactic by Democrats to appeal to authority of Republicans by continually mentioning Scalia, saying the Second Amendment was not absolute, talking about how Reagan supported the '94 assault ban, and how law enforcement largely supports the ban.
My law enforcement community wants me to vote for this bill.
In the Heller case, a very simple statement was made by that super liberal, Antonin Scalia. That's why law enforcement largely, not all of them, support this bill. But that measure had support from law enforcement and from both Democratic and Republican presidents, including Ronald Reagan, from a president that used to be revered on the Republican side of the aisle, but is now not looked at as such a reverential figure. Ronald Reagan said this,
and I do not care. In my mind, the limitation on the Second Amendment and support of assault weapons bans are blemishes. I do not obey their words as if they were sacred. They keep insisting they are not taking away firearms.
Fact, 1808, led by Mr. Cicilline, allows gun owners to hold their guns. This deals with the transfer of guns. Fact.
It's not about taking guns away.
This bill takes away nobody's weapons because existing weapons are grandfathered in.
As Mr. Nally has pointed out, no weapons are taken away. This legislation would prohibit the possession and manufacture, sale, and transfer of semi-automatic assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. It does not take any of those away from any citizen. To be clear, we are not undermining the Second Amendment. This bill will not lead to confiscation of firearms, but of course our NRA friends have this slippery slope concept that anything we do, even banning cop killer bullets, goes too far because the next step and the next step and the next step.
That is correct.
We'll reduce the prevalence of assault weapons, ban the purchase of assault weapons, get them off of our streets.
No, the assault weapons, the Second Amendment is designed to allow for a well-regulated militia, which is to say in our day, the National Guard. The assault weapons ban would take the weapons of war off our streets and save countless lives.
Okay, so in reality, there will be confiscations because what happens when someone dies and they try to will their firearm to a relative or friend? Well, that's not allowed because that counts as a transfer, so someone will have to come and take or, confiscate these firearms. And how could they possibly do that? Wouldn't you need some sort of, a list or maybe registry to enforce this?
I make lists all the time.
So yes, this would be the start of a slippery slope, and yes, this would result in the authorities with their guns coming to take away someone else's guns. They say that they are getting the weapons off the streets and that the Second Amendment is for a militia, not self-defense. They aren't even properly hiding their intentions here. And of course, what good is one of these videos without highlighting some of the more absurd lines?
Look in the mirror, folks. There's some people on your side of the aisle who say absurd things.
Meanwhile,
We have also continued to target the sales of these weapons to children and religious people.
Look at these little skulls with ponytails and that. The manufacturers stated that their goal was to develop a shooting platform that was not only sized correctly, but also looks, feels, and operates just like mom and dad's gun.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Mr. Speaker, the previous speaker on the Republican side said that citizens must be able to meet the government with equal arms. The United States government has hydrogen bombs. Does he think that every citizen ought to have a hydrogen bomb?
Based.
The cumulative debate from the Republican side have been members who've been wanting to show their knowledge of weapons, their intimate knowledge of weapons. They're almost a fetishism with weapons, something that only Freud would properly understand and be able to explain to the American people.
Do you still believe that those stabilizing braces would function as bump stocks?
Yes, they would.
Couldn't buy the assault weapon in California, so he just went over to Nevada and bought it there.
And that type of weapon is used solely for that, for killing people.
This is clearly false.
I often heard it said that the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. There was a good guy with a gun in the store that day that was working security.
Americans want their freedom back, and I would say to my colleague from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, your freedom stops where mine begins, and that of my constituents begin.
You see, she gets it. Rights extend from one individual to another, and within this space is their own circle of rights. Holding an AR-15 falls within the personal circle of rights and is therefore legal.
The CIA did a study and said that even shots to extremities all made fatal impacts on people.
Guess I'm too hard on myself when I go shooting. All lethal hits.
Another anti-gun bill that proclaims to make us safer, but does the exact opposite. It puts citizens at greater risk by taking away the rights of the law-abiding.
If you were to accept there are roughly 20 million AR-15 style rifles in the United States, would you not also have to admit that it seems that the AR-15 style rifle is in common use?
Well, I would have to admit that.
Who should not have to confront weapons designed for the battlefield.
These military-style weapons were designed for the battlefield.
If you are going out to the battlefield with a AR-15, you are in serious trouble. Or maybe you are a Russian invading the Ukraine.
And the military features banned by this bill are added to make these guns more accurate, more controllable, more concealable, and more deadly.
But in reality, the supporters of this ban spent most of their time lying that if this is passed, people will no longer live in fear. That if this is made law, it will save all the lives and act like no one will ever get killed again, which we all know is not true, and they do too. Even if there were no assault weapons, people will still be killed.
Go about their daily lives without fearing that some crazy person will come after them.
Our communities and our kids should not be held hostage.
Can't send their kids to school or attend a 4th of July parade without fearing it might be the last thing they ever do. What about their right to safely put their children on a bus to go to a crowded festival or simply walk down the street without fear of being struck down by gunfire?
You know, Americans deserve to be safe and to be free of fear that when their kids go to school, they'll be obliterated.
It pains me deeply that our children and our communities live in fear of suddenly losing their lives or the lives of loved ones on a daily basis.
And when she goes off to school, Scotty will learn her active shooter drills as she learns to tie her shoes.
No parent should fear seeing a child off to a mall, movie theater, or school, knowing that a killer wielding a weapon.
I rise because we have a governor in the state of Texas who could have saved all of those lives.
And it will prevent mass shootings and save lives.
These common sense reforms will save the lives of law enforcement officers and innocent Americans across the country.
Yes, but we never said that an assault weapons ban would solve every single case.
That's all for today. Comment below if you thought something was particularly awful or laughable in the hearing, or if there's anything I missed in the hearing that was pretty funny. This should fail in the Senate, but still, contact your representatives to be sure they know where you stand. Please subscribe to the channel if you are new. We sometimes do this political stuff, sometimes military surplus, and sometimes modern firearms. So please stop by again to check it out. I have an Amazon affiliate link in the description. Please buy things off of there. I hope you enjoyed the video or learned something. And if you liked this one, check out my last couple about the Judicial Committee hearing for this bill. Thanks for watching.